Theology, theology, with Pitts and Crook and M.O.B. Theology, theology, and Tonk too. Yahoo! Welcome back to another episode of Theology Talk with M.O.B. and our special guest today, junior high Bible teacher, Christy Johanningmeier. Christy, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you today. Hey, listen, because it's Passion Week, Easter Sunday's coming up here, I wanted to focus a little bit on the cross, the resurrection, crucifixion. So again, to our viewers, we're going to start with a relevant question. We'll move over to a hard-hitting question, and then we'll try to wrap things up with a practical question. This week, all focusing on crucifixion and resurrection with Jesus. So we'll start with you, our guest today, Christy. We'll talk about the relevant question, and that is this. What are some of the false theories of the empty tomb, and why don't they hold up?
All right, so that's a really big question. There's a lot of theories that we could talk about. So let me just focus on a couple. And I just want to say, when I was thinking about this, I thought that one of the things we have to remember is that it takes faith to believe any of this stuff because none of us were there. And so as we look at these other theories, we should think about how much faith does it take to believe in them too. So one of the first ones is Jesus wasn't really dead. He didn't really die. He was just mostly dead, like Wesley in The Princess Bride. And so if that's the case, then we have to think about what would it have taken to have that to happen. How would they have buried him if he wasn't really dead, taken him off the cross? So you would have to have a lot of soldiers who failed at their job to crucify him, and presumably they would have known how to tell the difference between someone who had died and who hadn't. And they clearly checked by piercing him with the spear. And then you have the people that buried him. They took him, they prepared his body, took him to the tomb. So for all of those people to have not realized that he was dead seems like pretty far-fetched. And also they didn't have all of the enhancing drugs that we have today, like that you could pretend like you're dead and stop your heart and stuff. They didn't have that kind of thing back then. So that seems kind of far-fetched to me, that all of that would happen.
We have evidence of anyone else who was crucified in the first century that I think it's called the swoon theory, where they fainted. These people that do this for a living, that know when you're dead and you're not dead, somehow missed it, and somehow he resuscitated enough to get out of whatever tomb he was in. And so, yeah, that's just it. What's unbelievable, I think, is not only is that a theory, but people actually identify it as a plausible theory. And yet, when you look at the facts, when you break it down, it's really hard to believe that through all the things Jesus went through, that he would have had just passed out, and that they would have missed that. Any other theories you found, Christy, or that you discovered?
Well, another one is that the people that saw him come back were hallucinating.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't really see him, or just kind of made it all up. And there's two ways you can look at that. Either they were hallucinating it, in which case that's a lot of people to be hallucinating the same thing. And I don't know very many cases of mass hallucination going on. And again, back then they didn't have as many enhancing drugs that cause hallucinations like we might have today. And I personally don't know anybody that has hallucinated naturally anything. So, but it's just a lot of people. Gone through something like that, or they just made it up, in which case you're basing everything you believe in on a bunch of people lying. But if their lie then causes them to go out and preach the gospel and change the world, that seems kind of a strange thing. You know, like if I wanted to lie about something, it would probably be something that would serve me rather than other people.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't lead to me being killed like the disciples did. You know, I'm not going to go tell a lie and then go and get persecuted and continue to tell a lie. So either hallucinating or lying, it doesn't seem to make sense to me either way.
It doesn't work. Hey, Christy, for being our guest, you get a round of applause. And so, a phenomenal answer. Yeah, I appreciate that. Tim, I'm going to move over to you then. And just to add on to that, what is so important about the resurrection? We celebrate it here during Easter. Christy just gave some false theories of the resurrection. And quite honestly, it's interesting because those theories don't exist unless people want them to exist. In other words, people throughout the millennia have been trying to disprove the resurrection. Why?
Well, first off, to answer that question, if anybody were to ask me that question like you all have, I would direct them to 1 Corinthians 15. That my brother Paul broke that down so beautifully. So honestly, I read through it so many times and I was like, wow, there's so much. And Greg wants me to do 2 or 3 minutes. And I've already wasted 30 seconds from my intro. So this is how I would answer that question. First off, according to Paul, resurrection brings restoration to a fallen creation under the curse of death. In verse 22 of that chapter, he says, For as in Adam all die, so also in Christ shall all believers be made alive. And so we have resurrection brings the curse of death. It defeats that, and now we have life. He goes on. Another reason why this is important is because the resurrection means. He says if there was no need for the resurrection, there'd be no need for faith. So if Christ had not been raised, then your faith is futile, and you're still in your sin. He says that in verse 17. Paul says even if this was the case, if this is the case, then eat, drink, and be merry, basically. But since Christ has been resurrected from the dead, it means that we will too be resurrected, as Paul says. He is the first fruits, the first fruits of those who fall asleep. So we too, who are in a relationship with Christ, will also be raised. And then lastly, my last point, and honestly, I could have preached on this for 5 hours. Lastly, understand that the resurrection brings us into a reality of our future selves. It aids us to understand that we will be resurrected. The vision of the future self should impact our identity in the present. Matt O'Reilly, he was a professor at Asbury. He says usually Paul's ethical explanations for things correspond to his future expectations of the resurrection. Paul's hope is that the believer would start to use their bodies as their future resurrected selves. So in other words, Paul even says, shall we continue in sin? In Romans 6, shall we continue in sin and let grace abound? He says, no, by no means. What needs to be done is that being a Christian or being a believer, we need to come to the realization that we will be resurrected and find enjoying that. And so my last point is, in our current case, we need to reflect on the future one, just like Jesus did before his resurrection. The resurrection is important because it allows us to see who God is making us to be. As the songwriter said, the resurrected King is what? Resurrecting me. So there you go.
Nice job, Tim. Hey, I appreciate that. And also, I like how you compared like what we're going to do to what Christ did. And quite honestly, back in Luke, I think 18, Jesus told us he was going to do this. And so I know that, apologetics and proving things isn't everyone's cup of tea today, but I don't want to follow anyone who told me he was going to do something and then didn't do it. And so Jesus said he did it, and there is no body And now, 2,000 years later, I think believers can really rest their hope on the fact that he is alive and well. He's just not in the grave. And so I like that we come together as a nation to celebrate Easter, but for Christians, it should be a daily occurrence where I'm praising God for his mighty act of power in sin and raising Jesus from the grave. So,
And now I'm in this reality of life with him. Like I'm not in the destination of death. Like one person said, his history is my destiny. Man. So in other words, the resurrection gives me hope for a better life. But I have to start thinking like that right now. But anyway, continue. I'm gonna be all day talking about this.
I love it, Pity. Hey, Matt, hard-hitting question here, and we're going to get to just a little bit here, but we focus on the crucifixion, focus on the cross. So let me just throw this out there. Did Jesus' death pay for all the sins of mankind, or did his death only pay for those who are saved? The theological term in the TULIP acronym would be limited atonement. And so let's just get right down to it, Matt. Did Jesus die for the sins of the world? Yes or no?
Either way, I'm in trouble after this. And so I'm going to forward you the hate mail. So especially in 2 or 3 minutes, that's why I'm drinking an energy drink, because that's a lot to tackle here. But did Jesus die to pay the sins for all mankind? I would say no. This would imply, in my opinion, universalism. And I would say outside of the universalists, everyone has some view of limited atonement, whether it's the Arminians, the Molinists, the Calvinists, heck, even the open theists, because all of us would say that Jesus' atonement applies to those who believe, and it does not ultimately apply to those who do not believe. But the subsequent question is, well, why do some people believe and others don't? And so it's directly attached to the doctrine of election. How do you become part of the elect? And there's two main theories. One would say that our faith makes us part of the elect. That's conditional election. The other would say that our faith is evidence of being part of the elect, and that's unconditional election. And it's a hard topic. There's a dialectic that continues to go on, but I would hold to unconditional election, and maybe I can just give 2 quick reasons why. And then I know.
Oh, that's a great time to cut out. That is a perfect time to cut out. I think you planned that. That's not even, you couldn't even, I don't know if you could plan it actually. Maybe God is saving you from whatever you're about to say so that there is a decrease in the hate mail. So while Matt is figuring not only how to get back on, but maybe figuring theology out, let me just jump in here. Matt probably was going to say I disagree with him. I don't know if he's a 5.
Am I not on?
Oh, now he's back. Okay.
Oh, am I? Okay.
Yeah, you're back, sort of. I mean, physically you're back. Let's see what you have there. How are you gonna wrap that one up there, MOB?
Okay, so can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you and the video's cutting in and out. We're good now.
Is it?
No, we're good now.
Okay. Are you good now? Okay. Well, my first reason for unconditional election is because I believe that everyone is spiritually dead. And although unbelievers can do whatever they want, they will never want God. And so in Romans 3, it says, there's none good, no, not one. And then Paul goes on to quote Psalm 14.
Right.
And he says, no one even seeks God.
Right.
So if you're an unbeliever, no one even seeks God.
Right.
Am I still cutting in and out?
A little bit. So let me just jump in here then, because we are going to talk about election and free will in another episode. But let me just fast forward then to, and I know you're making the tie to limited atonement, but let's just focus on that, because the opposite, or not, the other side of that coin would be unlimited atonement. And those verses that talk about universal salvation by way of John 3:16 or 1 John 2:2, 1 Timothy 2:4, that it seems to suggest that Christ died for the sins of the world. So for someone that believes in limited atonement, how do you, what I've heard is that you have to take those passages and redefine world there to mean the elect.
Well, let me know when you can hear me because I don't want to sound weird.
Oh, we can
Do
hear
I?
You just sound weird in general, but that's
I
just,
sound weird in general. Okay, all right, I see.
We can hear you, yeah.
yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So, what I would say with those world passages is, of course, Christ's death is sufficient for this world and 1,000 others. But I would say, like 1 John 2, maybe we can just tackle that.
Yeah.
That he's the propitiation, not for just our sins, but also for the entire world, right? Typically, what people do on that passage is to say, well, look at the context. This is a Jewish person primarily talking to a Jewish audience. Back then, the issue was they thought that salvation was only for the Jews. And the argument is it's not just for the Jews, but it's also for the world. It's for the Gentiles as well. Yeah. So that would be kind of a response to a typical Arminian verse. And I don't know if I'm wary to keep speaking because I don't know how I sound, but I can give you a positive argument as well.
Yeah, no, go ahead. But so, and let's not limit that. So I think you're suggesting that there's, Calvinism, Arminianism. Could we add
Molinism? Yeah, there's many others. Yeah.
What about Almoraldeism? Because that seems to fit. That's Ryrie Schaefer, where the death of Christ potentially could cover the whole world because of those passages.
Yeah.
Was accepted, if you will, by the elect. So,
yeah.
Is there such a thing? Could there be such a thing as a 4-point Calvinist?
Absolutely. There's also such a thing as a 7-point Calvinist. John Piper, right? So there's all kinds of ranges here. Yes. Okay. There's soft Calvinism, hard Calvinism. So
I just want to I want to see who's on your side and who's on my side. So I want to go around the horn here, just really quickly.
Okay.
Kitty, where do you fall on this?
You know what? I'm still deciding. I'm probably more towards Matt.
Okay, Tom Croak.
Wow. Okay, I'm unlimited.
There you go. Praise God. I knew there was something good about you, Christy.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm not sure. You mentioned a whole lot of names, which honestly I haven't thought about since seminary. So my position is Jesus, like his blood has the potential to cover everybody's sins, but in particular, like the people that believe. So is that limited?
It's be Almoraldeism. It's unlimited. But there's it's not all the way over to Arminianism. So it's kind of the middle ground.
Middle. Yeah, I tend to lie in the middle ground usually.
I ruffle feathers, right? Yeah, I got you. So Matt, just for those that want to agree with you, and there are great arguments on both sides. What would
there really are? Yeah,
an argument that would suffice for limited? Because I think logically, there's some logic there by way of no wasted blood, and Christ said that he died for his sheep, and so there's some issues there, like the word all is not really the word all in every passage, and so we do. What would be a rational reason to take a limited atonement position?
Well, I would say logic can work on both sides. So maybe a strong biblical argument would be from John 6. And I'll just summarize it real fast. In verse 37, it says, all that the Father gives me will come to me. Yeah. So all that the Father gives to some, they will come. In verse 39, it says that Jesus is not going to lose any of them, but he's going to raise all of them up on the last day. So all that the Father gives will come. He will raise all of them up. And then in verse 65, Jesus is not surprised by the unbelief, because he said, that is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them. So the logic would be, all that the Father enables comes. Jesus doesn't lose any of those that have been enabled,
right,
and they will all be raised on the last day. Yeah. And then John, so.
Well, no doubt, but so are you saying that so election and limited atonement are inextricably linked? Because I'm unlinking them.
Yes.
So you're saying.
Yeah, I would say it depends on how you define limited atonement. I'm uncomfortable with that classical definition.
Okay.
I'm more comfortable with saying that the blood of Jesus is sufficient for everyone in 1,000 worlds, but the Father intended it to a specific group, like we see in John 6.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. And to our viewers, honestly, this is nothing other than people who want to read the scriptures, that want to love Jesus Christ because they came to know him personally, and they run across some passages that seem to suggest one thing, but then they read other passages that seem to suggest another. And so this is nothing more than people over thousands of years who have read the Bible and then have asked God, how does this work then? How help me understand how these passages can be interpreted. And so when we do that, we have great men and women of the faith that land on either side. My hope and prayer when we discuss the hard-hitting issues, honestly, is that it doesn't do two things. It doesn't draw us away from evangelism and discipleship, and nor does it draw us away from fellow believers who could take a different position. And so, Matt, super great answer. I appreciate that. Moving along then, Tom Crow, can we just get practical? We live in a day where it's just crazy face masks and the like. And so people are at home, monotony could be setting in here. And yet the scriptures just proclaim over and over again that we worship an active, creative God. And yet some of our creative juices may be waning here. So what help do you have for us? How can we maintain a level of creativity in four walls?
Well, it's hard to believe that monotony would set in when every day you wake up and you stay in your same 800 square feet every single day. Hard to believe, right? Tim, I'm looking at you. No, I'm just kidding. That's a single guy, or not single guys, but people with the small apartments. So, what I find fascinating is of any created beings, humans have been given the ability to create. I think it just sets us apart from other, even the animal kingdom is, while they may make tools, they don't really create. And so we all are gifted in such a way that God's given us gifts. Now, if you ask any of my Bible students, I'm a horrible drawer. Like, I've never graduated past stick figures, but I've nailed stick figures, right? But I know that I'm never going to paint a Picasso or anything famous. Like, the most somebody would ever pay for my paintings is like a penny, maybe, right? So it's just to tune into that. But part of it, I think, is to dive down and just pause. Where I've been refreshed is just observing nature. So I was out hiking the other day, like a few weeks ago, but I came across an anthill, and because I'm kind of bored, I sat down and just sat and watched the ants move. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but there's ants everywhere, right?
Never.
Yeah, well, try it. Okay, this is going to be weird, but try it. Like, legitimately just go sit, because what else are you going to do, right? I got an hour or two. And it's fascinating to watch how they take the one grain of soil out from underneath wherever they're coming from. They walk it and they set it down in a specific spot, and then they go back in. And then there's other ones coming in. And it's just, there's so much creativity of God, but also just creativity even in the nature around us. The flowers are out right now. The cactuses are starting to bloom. Where did all those colors come from? Like I just was sitting down this. Why do we have flowers, right? Like, why are they so colorful? Why are they so diverse? Where does that come from? And so if the study of nature, I guess, reinvigorates me at least to start being more creative and trying to see what would come to mind.
Man, that's a great answer. I really appreciate that. It really, I think God is giving us in this season some time to reflect and some time to pause. And you're right, we just blow by that to get on with our checklist. But now, some of us, most of us have some time just to sit and reflect and wonder and ponder. And that's not getting metaphysical or anything. It's really just looking at our designer and being in wonder of what he did. And someone once told me, if you're mildly impressed with this, wait till heaven. Wait till we're in. There's no sin. And if stuff like this blows your head off, what is heaven going to do to us? And so I'm often thinking of heaven as that guy in Men in Black when they come into the first one, where they come into the store and they shoot his head off and it blows off and then it grows back. I think heaven's going to be like where we just grow heads back because we'll be so in awe of what God is doing. We just can't take it. Our minds won't be able to take it. And then we'll just grow one back. So, Tom, really appreciate the answer. Hey, I want to wrap this up today by asking, you talked about books last week. We're going to talk about podcasts this week, what your recommend is. Christy, I'm going to start with you as our guest, but you weren't here last week. So give us a book that you'd recommend to our audience.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that because I don't actually listen to podcasts. I'm a visual person. I have to have something to see. So this is one of my favorite books, and I think could be really useful for a lot of people right now. Disappointment with God by Philip Yancey. I read this every time I'm going through a period of time when I'm just asking those questions like, why God? Why is this happening? And he doesn't have all of the answers, but he really helps you to connect with God and just experience his presence, which is a great thing. So if you're feeling that at all right now, read this book.
Thanks so much, Christy. Tim Pitts, what do you got for us? Podcast?
A podcast I have that really inspires me is called The Hour of Holiness by Dr. Bill Urey. I'm a little biased because he was my professor, but the man is a genius. He's doing a series now on hope, which is not no surprising, but it's a phenomenal series, really inspiring me. I listen to it on my walks as I observe nature too, Tom. And so, yes, it wasn't ants today. It was actually a wasp. And I was like, interesting. I stood away. But anyway, Hour of Holiness, probably a good podcast to listen to.
Very cool. Thanks, Tim. Tom Croak.
All right, mine's not necessarily spiritual in nature, but the one that comes to mind, it's called Up First from NPR News. It's basically they do about a 10-minute segment of the 3 top news stories of the week or the day, pardon me. It's a really good way to just stay informed of like what's going on in the globe and in the country. I find it also pretty non-biased as well. And so I just find it a good way to not get overwhelmed with all the news going on because they give you the facts, they give you a little bit of interviews, and then they move on. And so I don't have to tune into hundreds of news stories or stations and read it all. I can get what I need to know and then move on. So that's what I've been doing usually on my commutes into work. Well, now from the commute from the bedroom over to my kitchen. So
thanks, Tom. Matt O.B.
Yeah, I think it's important to do what we did today, and that's have discussions where some of us disagree, but we know that we agree on the main issues, and we can do that in a humble way. And so there's a podcast called Unbelievable, and on Unbelievable, they debate secondary issues. They let you hear from people on both sides, and so they can make the conclusion that matches, in your opinion, what the scriptures teach the most. And so I think it's such an important characteristic and talent and goal to achieve there. So Unbelievable.
Good. Thanks, Matt. And then I listen to Ben Shapiro. I listen to John Piper's sermons, Gospel in Life with Tim Keller. Recommend all of them. And so, watch this. I'm going to try to bring this all the way around. When you are exercising, throw on a podcast instead of just music all the time, and see if any one of those that these guys recommended, or an audio book from Christy, throw that in. Double dip here. And so go out and enjoy God's creation. Listen to a podcast, be informed. So it sounds like, hey, we're split kind of almost down the middle on some hard-hitting issues. I love that. I love that we all don't have to drink Kool-Aid, all right? And we can use the minds God's given us and keep pursuing Him. So, guys, listen, have a great Easter week. Have a great Good Friday and an even greater Resurrection Sunday. We'll see you next time.
Theology with Pitts and Croak and MOB and Tonk.